7:37, and you all know that the Missouri U.S. Senate race, the seat held by Claire McCaskill, is a matter of hot topic these days. Recently, as Ann Wagner said, she's not going to be running, and everybody's in place. There's not the foregone conclusion, and it is not for sure that Claire McCaskill is even running, and they might put up Jason Kander. But I got news for Jason Kander. There's somebody else around who knows how to put together an AR-15, okay? There's somebody else around who knows how to handle a gun, among many different things. His name is Austin Petersen, and he is an awesome guy at AP for Liberty, austinpetersen.com, the first Republican to jump in to the U.S. Senate race. And Austin Petersen, first of all, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And by the way,
hello?
We have a mutual friend. His name is Judge Napolitano.
Oh, yeah. The guy who taught me everything I know about the Constitution. Yeah, he and I are pretty close friends.
Buddy, I'm going to have him on tomorrow. He's a regular guest on the Allman in the Morning show. And I got to tell you, I'm like you. I could sit and listen to him talk all day long. He is such a sage. He's the guy who we go to on the top of the mountain for the absolute ruling when it comes to the Constitution and what's right and what's wrong. And I know anybody trained by him the way you are would be a fabulous U.S. Senator. So you're the first to jump in. I love this. Born in Independence, raised in Peculiar, near a town called Liberty, the next U.S. Senator from Missouri. I love it, man. You're right out of the blocks, ready to go.
Yeah, well, I think I embody Missouri values. It's hard work, independence, freedom. That's really why I'm doing this. I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I believe that people ought to be able to control their own lives, their own finances, their own religion. They ought to be able to make their own decisions for their lives. So I'm not running because I want to lord over anybody. I'm running because I want to leave everybody alone, essentially. I kind of come from the whole Calvin Coolidge style of thinking that oftentimes it's better to kill bad bills than it is to write new ones. So I plan on going in there and helping people like Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz, who I'm very much ideologically aligned with, to help pass their agenda and hopefully get some planks of my own in there.
Well, everybody in the studio just looked at me when you mentioned Calvin Coolidge because you and I can geek out all day long about Calvin Coolidge because I love that guy. I remind people of the famous 1924 Calvin Coolidge speech. It was the first time a president had ever been both on film and recorded by voice, and nobody listened to him at the time.
Take from everyone a part of his earnings and force everyone to work for a certain part of his time for the government.
That was 1924, 10 years after the racketeers in Congress went ahead and shepherded in the federal income tax. And to this day, if people had just listened to Calvin Coolidge, because by the time 28 came around, he's like, I don't want any more of this. These people haven't listened to me forever. And so there's our big government right now, and you say you want to go to Washington to try to change all that.
Yeah, well, his famous quote was, "Don't expect to build up the weak by pulling down the strong." And we very much have a system right now where we're punishing success with the income tax, such as it is, and in a perfect world, we'd like to get rid of the income tax, but right now I'm kind of running on a platform of just cutting the rates because, I don't want to terrify everybody, but I would like to make our tax system simpler because I think collectively, this country spends about 9 billion hours every year just to comply, something like $450 billion just to comply with the tax code. So I want to turn tax season into tax 2 minutes. That way, you get rid of all the exemptions, stop giving away tax breaks to millionaires. Everybody's on a level playing field. Flat rate, 15% across the board, 2 minutes, do your taxes, checkbox, done. That's what I'm campaigning on.
I'm ready, buddy. Hey, here's the deal, though. You came in second in the Libertarian Party primary behind Gary Johnson. This was in 2016, running as a Libertarian. But keep in mind, you know what people are going to say. When Austin Petersen says, I'm the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, they'll say, well, he's not really a Republican. And by the way, even though you probably don't agree with everything that President Trump stands for, the bottom line is thanks to that candidacy, we have actually been able to say, well, you know what? We don't even know what a real Republican is. So really, for the time being, it looks like many of our Republican guys have all been really more like Democrats. So back to the conservative foundation for Republicans.
Yeah, well, think about this. I mean, Ronald Reagan said explicitly that libertarianism is the heart and soul of conservatism, and I believe that. I mean, I've always identified with people like Ronald Reagan and Calvin Coolidge, and quite frankly, the libertarians, many of them didn't care for me because they saw me as too conservative. Some of them told me explicitly, and not in any uncertain terms, that they thought I should go as a Republican. Some of them, not for nice reasons, and many of them because they thought that I could win. They want me to go and beat Claire McCaskill. They don't want. There's a catchphrase that libertarians in the party sometimes use: "Liberty in our lifetime," right? Like we're hoping for liberty in our lifetime, and I'm trying to up the timeline, so I like to say "liberty by sunset," because maybe I'm young and a little impatient, but I'm ready for some reforms. I want to really limit government. So, I mean, in many ways, I'm much more Republican than many Republicans because in a true small R sense, right, in the sense that Benjamin Franklin was talking about after they wrote the Constitution, when they asked him what kind of government they had given us, he said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." And that's what I'm fighting for.
Well, we found even with the Trump candidacy, and again, I know that you're not in line with him on everything, but here's the deal. When you look at the reason why President Trump was elected is because of people realize that, you know what, they don't really know what conservatism is, or they don't really know what Republicans are, and they know what the Republican Party has provided them for the past 20 years or so. And what happens is we have so many people going to Washington who are there really just to manage the money that's been stolen from us, as opposed to put in true reforms. And so that's been the frustration. That's why a fresh look at governance is what we need, I think, on all levels.
Absolutely, and I like that you use the word "stolen" because that definitely resonates with me. Because Donald Trump is kind of borrowing from Reagan when he says he'd like to make America great again, and I kind of like to borrow from Trump when I say I'd like to make taxation theft again. The income tax is, the founding fathers didn't give us an income tax. They did that for a reason, because they believed that the fruits of our labors were ours. And there were many ways that they were able to collect tax revenue that didn't require them taking from our direct revenues. They had things like lotteries, tolls, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, a lottery was one of George Washington's ways to pay for roads. He used to sign tickets in order to have a lottery so that they could raise funds for things like roads and bridges, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'd like to talk about those kinds of things because I think that's what the founders envisioned for the United States, I think, was really a very beautiful vision in many ways. I mean, some people give them a lot of hell because, they still had slavery at that time, but many people don't know, of course, that at the Declaration signing, it was the southern states that were pushing to maintain slavery because they actually almost abolished slavery right there. So I think that obviously there's no perfect country, and the Constitution itself wasn't perfect. That's why we had an amendment process. But I would like to get back to that kind of vision, that individualist aspect, because ever since the height of the progressive era, post Coolidge, we've had bigger and bigger and bigger government with a slight nod towards freedom with Ronald Reagan, and now we seem to be going back the other direction again because, it is a tendency of government to expand and liberty to shrink. So my campaign is all about turning the tide back towards liberty, towards the individual, respecting especially the 9th and 10th Amendments, which really explicitly state in no uncertain terms that any rights or any powers that are not granted to the government ought to be turned right back around to the states or the people. And so the people are the rightful guardians of their own destiny, their own lives, and their own fortunes. And I believe that's really what's going to bring prosperity back to the United States.
Yeah, and when you mentioned those three guys, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz, you mentioned three individuals who, in many ways, were early on opposed to President Trump's, being president. But here's the deal, though. They have become, in my opinion, his most valuable asset in the Senate right now because they're pushing him to not settle in the ways that many of the Republicrats have wanted him to. And so they're keeping him honest in many ways, and we need more people like that in the Senate, not fewer.
I completely agree. I mean, I'm like you. Like, I was skeptical, just like those guys. But what's been amazing is to see that Trump has been meeting so frequently with Rand Paul, and I know that they had some disagreements during the primary. And certainly I echoed my disagreements as well. But now that I see that he's actually listening to people like Rand Paul, it gives me a lot of hope. I mean,
yeah.
I actually look forward to meeting with the president and hopefully being able to convince him on some of these free market reforms as well, because Donald Trump came out and said explicitly recently, twice, not only on Twitter, but also in a direct statement, that if the Senate can't get their act together on a health care bill, they ought to pass a clean repeal, because the Republicans voted 50 times when Obama was the president for a clean repeal of this bill. So they might as well just go ahead and complete the promises that they campaigned on. So he appears to be listening to Rand Paul. I'm excited about that. And so I want to get more people like that in there so that we can start to turn this ship around.
I completely agree, and I think that President Trump is more than willing to listen in that regard. The only adjustment I would make to your comments is that, and you probably were one of those who might have rolled their eyes a while back. I was actually never skeptical about President Trump. So, I mean, but nonetheless, I still am so appreciative of people like you, and have been in the past. And the libertarian, I actually thought of Trump as more, in many ways, more libertarian than any Republican we've seen in a while, oddly enough, in terms of his approach to our skirmishes overseas and making people finally spend money on their own missiles instead of us.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited about that because, Ron Paul got booed, and I think it's because it's just about the delivery, right? Because
right.
Ron Paul, in many ways, did not appear to have the sort of strength that we expect from a commander in chief. So when Donald Trump was saying some of the same things that Ron Paul was saying, I was cheering and so were the Republicans. And it kind of made me sad because I realized that presentation is in many ways more important than policy itself when it comes to politics. And so I realized that Donald Trump, maybe he really believes this. Maybe he really does want to stop making America be the policeman of the world. Because when he talks about America first, that sort of historic lineage of true conservatism is there. Yep. The idea that, that if we can have peace through strength, but that doesn't mean that we need to be involved in every single civil war overseas. We need to pick our battles and realize that our foreign policy in many ways has made the world not more safe. It's actually made it more dangerous for us. So I'm really hoping that President Trump lives up to those expectations that he set when he campaigned.
AustinPetersen.com. That's with a T, AP for Liberty on Twitter. We appreciate you joining us and hopping on the show, and best of luck to you. And, of course, you're going to be welcome anytime on the show. So we appreciate you taking the time out. And if you go to his website and you go to the Twitter page, this guy's ready to go. I've actually had people on. What's your website? Well, we haven't quite developed that yet. It's like, no, Austin is this is looking good. So good for you.
Thank you. And tell the judge I said hello.
I definitely will. Tomorrow I'm going to be on the air with him, so I definitely will. I'm going to grab a little soundbite from our interview here, and I'll play it for him. So
thank you very much.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much. Austin Petersen at AP for Liberty on Twitter. It's Common Sense Radio.